Let's go back to New York and some of the cityscapes you've done. In a video, you said that initially you doubted whether or not you'd be able to accomplish anything because of the scale of the city. Can you flesh that out a little bit?
Absolutely. So I knew I had to get to New York. I saw the film Metropolis, 1922, Fritz Lang film, and I thought, I have to get to New York. Got there, and for somebody who's interested in cities, I went to the rooftop on 29th Street, 29th and Lexington Avenue. Chrysler Building was on one side, Empire State just up the road on 29th and 5th Avenue. I look out the window first of all, and I see the Empire State. I had to ring the agent, say, "Is that the Empire State?" I just couldn't believe it. Then I went on the rooftop and looked over the city, and there was so much city. So somebody that's interested in cities, New York was quite overwhelming, and I did doubt it. So I spent 2 weeks. So it was my first trip to New York, and I spent 10 weeks there.
Yeah.
And it was the biggest risk I took because I gave up my teaching job at the time. I was paying rent in a studio, mortgage, and also rent in New York. And just thought, it took 1.5 years to pay it off. And there was always the joke about the Commonwealth Bank sponsoring it, credit card. But to answer your question, what I did is I went up the top there and I drew for 2 weeks, mainly that view. And I kept drawing it until, just like this, until the city became second nature. And I could draw it the way you would speak. And so I found like a hieroglyphics, like this represents windows. Anytime I make a line like this, the L, that's a window. And then I would finish it later. But like I wanted to be able to look at the view and in one shot be able to do it. And in that one shot contain everything that contains in New York. And so I guess I'm probably incredibly ambitious. I took 40 sheets of copper with me and scratched every second day for 10 weeks. And then I drew the second day because as you're scratching, it hurts your arm and you can't scratch every day. So I would spend 1 day scratching, 1 day drawing. And after 2 weeks of just drawing, before I did that, so it's the first time that I felt, I don't know if I'm going to do it, just because there was so much. It's like being in heaven and having all the things you want, but then not knowing what to do with it. And that thing of, you said earlier, if I bring you back to what you said earlier around the idea of sometimes what you want to do and your taste. So I knew about all the history of New York and New York artists. So that's what drew me there, pardon the pun. But I wanted to go there to sort of be part of that history. And that was really ambitious of me because it's an ambitious city.
And were you doing this in front of people at that point?
At that point, I was doing it on the rooftop on my own.
On your own.
But then, I started doing it in front of people, scratching on copper and I like the idea that my works are artifacts of the city, so that they're of the city. They're part of it. And so by dragging a 6-foot canvas into the subway,
I saw footage of you doing that.
I'm glad you watched that one. Big 6-foot canvas, and I remember this woman wearing Prada and saying to me, "I hope that's not wet." And I said, "No, it's dry." I said, "Look, no cab would pick me up because they thought that it was going to wet there. The big cabs wouldn't stop." And but I wanted the canvases to be part of the city. Like I wanted the physicality and the history of me walking the city. So the canvases contain the archaeology, and they contain my memories, and they contain my sweat. And some of them have dirt on the back. The copper plates, I actually will imbue them onto the footpath and rub them onto the concrete, and then scratch out the image. So you can see it's the opposite of trying to make a perfect image. It's more about making an image that only I would do and making the decisions that only I would maybe make, and then sitting there and just see what the city gives to me. So like I was open to what it would give me. I didn't set out, I knew roughly what I wanted to do. I'd map it out, New York. I'd map it out in my book, and what I would do, a little bit like, they used to describe the cave painters as drawing the hunt so that then they could go out and kill the animal. They used to think that's kind of, I don't know a lot about that now, but in the old days when I studied art history, that was one of the theories, that they were doing it as a confidence builder. Let's draw these figures of killing animals, then we go out and do it. That's changed now, but I remember thinking to myself, I'll keep filling in these little squares and rectangles. They represent the images I want to make. And I did this sort of comic strip, and every time I drew something, like here's some cranes on 29th Street with the Empire, I would do a little sketch of it. And somehow, by ticking it off, by drawing it, and then revisiting them all as I did them, like seeing this map, somehow it would give me the confidence to go back out. But, as you know, New York is so intense that if I did stuff on the street, every now and then after 2 or 3 days of it, I had to have a day indoors to not be out there.
Right.
Because New York is unlike any other place. You step out your door and you take a breath and you say to yourself, what's going to happen today?
Mm-hmm.
And, your morning might start off crap. Give it a couple of hours, it'll be the best day you've had in New York.
Absolutely. Or the other way around.
Or the other way around.
There's always something waiting for you. It sounded like what you were doing with that is, in a way, and similar to the theory of the cave painters, was creating your own destiny. Little things to kind of tick off.
Yeah. I would tick them off. And I'd literally walk past the view. I remember walking past these Russian guys who were building this building, and they had this cement mixer and the Empire State was in the background. And they sort of stopped me. They said, hey, you draw me, you draw my truck. Sorry for the accent.
We do not have any Russian viewers, don't we?
They're not in a hurry.
Right. Oh, gosh.
Sorry, that's a daddy joke. See, that's not good. That's not going to work anywhere, is it? Okay. So, scratching away. And what was my point? What was your question?
So the people, it was part of the live painting.
Yeah.
A few Russian guys came.
And then all of a sudden I'm engaged with that. And I thought, sure, you know what, I'm going to put them in there because I wanted that story in there. I wanted them in there. And so I would just allow the city to do its thing.
Right.
And then I would document that in my little storyboard. And I'd have little ticks. I'd say, right, I've drawn a view of the empire where there's things in front of it. Now I want to draw one when there's nothing in front of it. And I just kept building up almost like a Gotham City comic strip.
Right.
And some of the pieces are called things like Gotham City, Cranes in the Empire State. Some of them are called, Nighttime New York. They sort of have a comic book kind of quality to them. And even the marks that I make, the graphic quality of them, and even the history of printmaking,
These are the black and white ones, right?
Yeah, the ones that I've scratched onto the copper.
Yeah.
And so they're the kind of works that become really visceral because you're really physical with the plate and you're scratching into it. And then they really are some of my most favourite things are the early ones I did of New York where they contain that memory of seeing New York for the first time. It's like meeting all your movie stars. In fact, some of the artworks have halos around them to represent the idea of them being stars to me.
Right.
So,
I remember you even saying that you captured the sound of New York.
I hope so.
Yeah.
So
it's a living piece.
Yeah, living piece is a good way of putting it. And so I try to listen to all the sounds because like if you're doing it at home, it is almost like a replay. Whereas if you're doing it live.
As in from a photo?
Yeah. You're too comfortable. But if you're doing it on the street and you're hearing people yelling, you're hearing the sounds of the rhythm of the city, and the city almost vibrates. New York almost vibrates. You can, the energy, it sounds cliche, but that people talk about the vibe. So as an artist, if you're interested in doing things on the streets, which, some artists do it that way and some artists don't. And I think it's important to do both. So I've worked both ways. And I think one can offer one thing and the other one offers another thing.
Right.
But they offer different things. And sometimes they can meld. And sometimes often I'll start them on site and finish them in the studio. But I need that first capture on site. And that started thanks to my lecturer, Herta Klujpop, who's an amazing dry point artist who dry point is the technique I used for many years of scratching directly onto the plate. And the deeper you scratch, the darker the mark.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And so she taught me that. So she got me to go outside at RMIT when they were creating Melbourne Central. And to me, it looked like a New York scene. It was hustle and bustle. I had never really spent much time in the city. I used to be afraid of catching the train from my eastern suburbs in Mitcham, 45 minutes away. It used to scare me a bit to get the train. I used to forget even which side to go. That takes you to the city. And, when I finally went to RMIT, it was just a blessing, I just loved being in the city. I knew I was home there,
Did you enjoy that clip? Did you not? It doesn't matter to me. Subscribe. For the love of God.